we're going to move right ahead into this next segment. That was a great first half hour. We're going to have even better second half hour. We're going to be hearing from what I call the Vice Squad of the Chicago Sun-Times. And we're not talking about Miami Vice. We're talking about right here in Chicago, the weed and gambling scene, which is covered ably by Tom Schuba and Mitchell Armentrout. Just going to give brief introductions, and then we're going to get into it. Mitchell Armentrout is a staff reporter and occasional assistant Metro editor for the Chicago Sun-Times. He joined the newspaper in 2013. He covers state and local politics in Illinois and Chicago, especially surrounding the expansion of gambling in Illinois, and including the addition of 6 new casinos and a burgeoning legal sports betting industry. Welcome, Mitchell.
Thanks so much for having me, Laura and Lynn. It's a real honor.
Thank you. And Tom Schuba has been a staff reporter at the Chicago Sun-Times since 2017, where he covers breaking news, crime, and the exploding cannabis industry. This year, his work on the pot beat earned him a Peter Lisagor Award and 2 first-place honors in the Illinois Press Association's Editorial Excellence Contest. Tom lives in Avondale with his wife, Nina, and their 10-month-old daughter, Edith. Hi there, Tom. And why don't each of you, if you would, share what's the hot headline for you? What's the breaking news or soon to be breaking news on each one of your beats? I'll start with you, Mitchell.
Well, there's a lot going on in the world of Illinois gambling. Tomorrow is the application deadline for developers to submit bids to the city of Chicago to build a casino. It's something that mayors have tried to get for decades, going back to Richard M. And it looks like it's finally happening in Chicago, but it's been a long road since that legislation passed in Springfield back in 2019. It's actually unclear exactly how many developers are even going to submit bids for the Chicago casino, because obviously the tax rates on that are pretty high. According to some industry analysts. Of course, any tax rate is too high for a lot of industry analysts, so it's kind of hard to put into context exactly how sincere that judgment is. But tomorrow we expect to see at least get an idea of how high the interest is in running that casino downtown. And at the same time, the state regulators are also vetting potential developers for 2 additional casinos in the suburbs, one in Waukegan and then one in the south suburbs. So there's a total of 4 groups vying for those 2 licenses. So things are pretty hot across the board over here.
Well, as you point out, this is the Chicago casino has been decades in the making, and so many efforts have failed in the past. So assuming that it's really going to take off this time, that these bids are going to fly, or one of these bids is going to fly, what's your outlook on how long all this is going to take? This is, I suspect that the mayor's been wanting to put some casino revenue in every budget she's had so far. And when do you think that the casino will actually there'll be some ground broken, or it'll actually get off the ground?
That's the $5 billion question, I guess, because the revenue from this casino is going to be earmarked for police and firefighter pension funds. But yeah, when will the city start collecting on that? It's going to be at least, we're only at the stage where developers are, putting in their bids. You've got to think it's going to take at least, 6 to 8 months for the city to land on a choice. And then from there, the city forwards it to the state. And they've already taken more than 2 years to evaluate bids that were submitted for other jurisdictions. So, you're looking at the short end, you're looking at 2 years maybe for this to get off the ground. Maybe some of the developers will offer fast track plans. We'll see. But this is still something that's definitely in the pipeline, and it's not particularly close, but it's closer than it's ever been before for the city. Yeah. So the mayor's got that.
For sure. I know you're going to continue to watch it for us. Thank you. And Tom, how about you? What's the headline, the hot topic for you on pot these days?
We're kind of still stuck in a state of gridlock over some really lucrative dispensary licenses, which were a really big part of legalizing recreational weed. Was this idea of, we're going to do this and we're going to equitably issue these. We're going to try to give them to people who are from areas that have been most harmed by past weed enforcement. So the process,
And that would be communities of color, minority
Yeah.
communities, because of disparities in enforcement of weed laws.
precisely.
Right?
And unfortunately they were, legally they weren't able to do this along racial lines. So how they had to do this was to say through these Bureau of Labor Statistics regions and pick them out. And either you had to be from there or you had to have a past cannabis arrest or conviction. There were specific ways that you could apply or could qualify as a so-called social equity applicant. And the idea was to prioritize these licenses to these folks because as it stands right now, the marijuana industry in Illinois is very white, it's very corporate, and as we speak, recreational marijuana sales have now probably surpassed $1 billion for the year.
Wow.
So it's a huge amount of money. What's happened is there's been huge amount of blowback over how the licensing processes went. That's resulted in just a steady stream of lawsuits. What's happened now is the Illinois Supreme Court is trying to consolidate some of these lawsuits to make it a little bit more manageable because as it stands, it's just a complete and utter mess.
Mm.
They have named the winners of 185 dispensary licenses, but there's a court case in Cook County that's holding up the issuance of those licenses. And there was a hearing in that case today that was kind of laughable because it was just so, it didn't seem like anyone really had an answer of what happens next with the consolidation of these cases. You have the Attorney General's office kind of having proposals for how to move forward. You have the judge kind of saying, whoa, step back. First, we have to hear from everyone who's involved and who may want to be involved. Because you had all these attorneys kind of chomping at the bit and saying, well, we filed the lawsuit too, and we want to be in the consolidated case too. So there's this drama that is, underpinned by this issue of the state not meeting its goal of, really diversifying this really burgeoning, developing industry.
So what went wrong? I mean, there were good intentions, and everyone agreed that that they wanted to make sure the communities of color, disenfranchised communities were going to benefit. So how did it all go awry?
It seems like there was some issues with the grading of the applications at first. The state has spent millions and millions of dollars to the global accounting firm KPMG to grade those applications. When they first announced who the finalists were, they had a lottery process to actually issue the licenses or to dole out the licenses. There was a lot of criticism because only 21 of hundreds of groups were named as finalists. So when that happened, Pritzker kind of drew back and said, okay, well, we'll have this kind of secondary application process where we'll, give other people a chance to get stuff double checked. And so they went through that process. They added more than double the amount of new licenses through new legislation. They tried to redefine what social equity is for some of those new licenses and moving forward. And yet we're kind of still stuck here. And what happened now was they had a lottery process that was conducted by the Illinois Lottery, and it appears that there were problems with that lottery process where people who should have been in the lottery were not included in the lottery. And so what they have to do now is have what they're calling a simulated lottery to give those people the same odds of winning the licenses, and then they will issue new licenses to those people. So it's very convoluted. And it's left people really frustrated. So, there are people who were named winners and they want to know, can we get property? Can we secure property? Can we get zoning? In Chicago, it's, they changed the zoning rules, but it's still onerous. You still have to get zoning changes in some cases if you want to move into certain neighborhoods, certain areas. And then other people want to know, can I sell this thing? Because it's worth a ton of money. And I've been sitting around and I've been burning money waiting on this process. And I want to know if I can offload this thing.
Sounds like a lot more lawsuits to come, actually.
I'm sure there's probably been one filed since I've been talking.
So, so also, and Mitch, there's equity issues even in any expansion of sports betting, stemming from the first days of allowing riverboat gambling in Illinois. Why is this town, and Mitch, so tough to figure out how to do it right? Mitch, can you go first? What in gambling? I mean, actually, it looks like now your gambling beat should be running the second lottery draw for the weed licenses. But anyway, this equity issue, getting licenses from all aspects of your beat, to the new casinos that opened up, to allowing sports betting. What's the problem?
As far as casinos, it's kind of interesting. As far as the South Suburban casino specifically, that's people have been talking about bringing a casino to Chicago's South Suburbs as long as they've been talking about bringing one to Chicago. It's viewed sort of as this beacon of economic prosperity for largely Black South suburbs that have been left behind in other respects, that haven't been invested in. Even now that they've finally landed this casino, there's a lot of consternation among some of these suburbs that, well, there's not, so this in the 2019 expansion, the state created 6 new casino licenses. The other 5 are earmarked for specific suburbs or cities: Chicago, Waukegan, Danville, Rockford. But when it comes to the South Suburbs, who've been looking for this casino for decades, they're still left to sort of fight for it amongst 5 or 6 different townships. And even once the revenue does start coming in down the line, a lot of those funds are going to be sort of parceled out in smaller chunks among 42 suburbs in the region. You've got to give lawmakers credit for finally making it happen, but it does raise more questions about how much is this actually going to benefit a lot of these suburbs, and how is that going to balance against the social costs of that, with gambling addiction and crime that is often associated with proximity to casinos.
So when we talk about the suburbs, you wrote a story recently about the Bears, as we all know, are thinking about going to Arlington Park, now the racetrack. And so Churchill Downs is a player to create a racino at Arlington Park. What's going to happen in that? And could you tell our viewers what exactly is a racino anyway?
So you've opened a whole other can of worms there, Lynn. You've got a lot of horsemen and horsewomen in fighting formation with that. So basically, racinos were, just as these casinos are being kind of held out as a light of hope for folks in the South Suburbs and other economically depressed regions. The state's horse racing industry has been dying a very slow death for a good 30 or 40 years now. So as part of the gambling expansion, lawmakers have allowed the state's two remaining horse racing tracks to offer slot machines and casino table games, so they can become racinos. It's a little play on casinos, as a means of supplementing these purses that the horsemen have just been shrinking for years and years as more folks have left the state. I should say, horse racing owners and trainers have gone to other states.
Would have to if I walked into a racino, if it existed in Arlington Park, I could place horse bets and maybe watch the ponies, but I could do blackjack, the slots, or whatever my game is.
Yeah, it would be a one-stop shop. Yeah,
and a sports book too.
Correct. Yeah. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. Here 2.5 years after the legislation passed, very controversially, Churchill Downs passed on the opportunity to open a racino, even though they'd spent years lobbying for that exact privilege.
Why?
Well, if you ask them, they would say that it's because the taxes are too high compared to casinos and other video gaming terminals. But if you ask a lot of the folks, or if you use common sense or business sense, I guess, Churchill Downs also owns Rivers Casino, which is not very far from Arlington Park, and which is the state's most lucrative casino by a long shot.
By
It's
O'Hare.
generating, right, it's generating hundreds of millions of dollars every year. It's, it's twice as productive as the next casino in the state. So the horsemen and the trainers, they've accused Churchill Downs of just trying to protect from any potential competition arising against Rivers. They're trying to protect that investment. So that all came to a head last month, as you said, Lynn, when Churchill Downs sold the land to the Bears, who are now exploring the possibility of opening a stadium. And that's another long project that we're following closely.
Well, it keeps reporters busy and it keeps those paychecks coming in, so that's important. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I want to ask both of you. Tom, starting with you, you said that we were bringing in $1 billion this year in revenues and recreational marijuana. Is there a saturation point, or is there a point where the demand, the supply outruns the demand, or where do you see that happening on the pot scene? And I would ask Mitchell the same thing about gambling.
There's much more illegal weed still being sold in Illinois. And the key reason for that is because the legal weed is extraordinarily expensive. Less so if you're a medical marijuana user where you can dodge some of the taxes. But still, in that case, much more expensive than the illicit weed.
Could you give me some? Could you give me some comparables? I'm sure you've been out there checking it out yourself personally, right? In terms of what it would be like legal versus illegal, in terms of percentages, or
kind of the baseline for if you're talking about flower, which is like weed, what probably an old school person like you understands it as. Now we have all these vapes and edibles and stuff, but weed, flower, an eighth of an ounce of that. Baseline is about $60 pre-tax and probably around $80 after tax then for that amount of marijuana. You could probably get that from a solid street dealer who's probably getting it from Colorado or California for about $30, no tax.
Big difference. Big difference.
So the taxes are going to fund things that are important for reaching the equity goals. Drug treatment and various other causes. So there's a bunch of different kind of pools where that money's going to. But you would think at the start of marijuana legalization there was real supply issues, especially with the flower. There's a limited number of cultivators still. So they really just weren't ready to meet this new demand when recreational sales first started. From what I understand, supply has really ramped up, and there is a lot of supply, but the prices haven't come down at all. So, understanding the supply side economics of it all and why that is, I don't know. Maybe there's companies were taking a lot of losses at the start. Just to keep things going and to establish their brands as people first started to come into the legal marketplace. But that's kind of a really big issue right now. Is that,
Tom, Congress has not allowed the legal weed industry, legal in Illinois and legal in but not everywhere. We don't have a federal, it is not legal federally to buy weed. Then because of that, the weed industry can't use most banks. I don't see any change coming in Congress right away because they've got their hands full. Another story is breaking tonight, about whether or not President Biden can get even his infrastructure and budget bill going. And the answer is for the moment, it seems no. But what kind of an impediment is it to the industry not to have banks, but yet it is still growing? How are they working that out? And at some point, to really have a thriving industry, do you think there needs to be?
It is an impediment, and I think
to have a federal, you have to allow these companies access to banking.
Yeah, so there's been different proposals, right? The big one has been like safe banking, and so there's been some thinking to say, let's detach the banking issue from what they're calling federal decriminalization, what advocates are calling federal legalization. And the detaching those two things is supported, I think, by the industry, existing industry, who says we need to get this done because this is will kind of change the game for them. And then you have advocates saying, well, then there won't be much impetus to do both if we do that first. So yeah, it's kind of hung up. It's a weird thing where you know, you have a figure as influential as Chuck Schumer touting to kind of go the full way with this thing. And he really earlier this year got in front of this and
Right.
tried to become the face of it. And it didn't really go anywhere. And it seems strange to me, you know, Biden has never really owned this, but maybe with his approval numbers sinking, it'll kind of, you know, on the political side say, well, marijuana is popular. Probably popular with swing voters, you know. So maybe as we get closer to the election, there'll be more of a motivation, you know, from the Oval Office to do something with this. Just
Well, I don't see that right now. So, Mitch, my question to you: in what is the biggest part of sports, of gambling growth? I mean, a mega casino obviously is big, whether it's in the south suburbs or Waukegan. Is it poker machines? Is it the sports book? You know, within the industry, where is Illinois going in terms of growth?
Well, for now, the growth has definitely been in sports betting. You know, there's only about 20, last I checked, we're now up to 24 states, and that includes Washington, D.C., that allows sports betting or has legal sports betting. And Illinois is very quickly, you know, the industry launched here in March 2020, right before the pandemic started. And even despite, you know, several months without any sports, Illinois is already the number 2 or 3 market in the whole nation, as far as just in terms of the amount of money that folks are spending or betting. And, you know, I think the industry certainly thinks that there's still more room to grow there. And I think that's a good thing, because there's really not a heck of a lot else where for the state to grow gambling wise. I mean, you know, if you count just the number of places where you can place a bet in Illinois, there's by far more places to bet here than there are across all of Nevada. And I'm not talking about casinos. Obviously, Nevada's got hundreds of casinos. We've only got 10, or as many as 16 once this expansion, if it comes to completion. But, you know, you drive around the suburbs or downstate, and you'll see, you know, video gaming lounges at, you know, bars and restaurants everywhere. I mean, or at least in suburbs and municipalities that allow it. So that's, you know, that's almost 8,000 establishments statewide. And, you know, that's about almost 40,000 machines outside of casinos. Each casino has about 16,000 machines inside. So at some point, you know, in the state with more places to gamble than Vegas, you've got to wonder, you know, how much, what are those diminishing returns going to look like when there are, you know, 5 or 6 new casinos? How much can you split that pie up? You know, obviously a lot of folks see potential in, you know, drawing tourists in downtown Chicago. You know, that's definitely a draw. But, you know, it's, you know, not to put too fine a point on it, but it feels like it's a pretty big gamble for, you know, a city like downstate Danville, you know, that is, you know, just seen its population decimated in the last half century. And they're just looking for any sort of, you know, economic engine to grasp onto. But we'll see how much it works out for them.
Well, so we have to roll out. You guys are just fonts of knowledge on these topics. And I guess our closing question is, what's your favorite part of the job, given that you're both on the vice beat? Tom, what's your favorite part? Do you sample the products as part of your research?
Do I like marijuana? Is this? Yeah, of course. It's great. What, I think like now that we're into a state of kind of like normalization with weed, it's gonna just become more and more common of, now my dad, for example, an old boomer, he's a medical marijuana user in Michigan, and I'll smoke weed with him sometimes now. So that's how,
It's another way to have a father-son relationship. I love
times they are
it.
changing.
What about you, Mitchell?
I was gonna say, actually, it was fun last Christmas. Actually, I did go out to the dispensary and the whole family got weed products for Christmas. It was fun. I got some honey flavored weed packets for my mom, and they make like ranch dressing packets. They make everything. It's very impressive. But yeah, for me personally, I am a big sports fan myself, so I was very excited to see the state legalize it a couple of years ago. But as far as the job itself, I just consider myself lucky to be able to work with folks like you, Lynn, and Tom, and our top political reporter, Rachel Hinton. Every day is a blast. It's fun.
Well, it's been a blast having both of you. Thanks so much. And thank you, Lynn. Lynn, you want to take us out?
Right. Thank you, Laura, and Tom and Mitch. Thanks so much. I hope the Vice Squad keeps on doing the very deep and serious reporting, big economic, big social, big cultural issues that both of you address on a daily, and equity issues that both of you address on a daily basis. I also want to thank again Robert Costa for being our guest.